back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. We are taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road. I swear it's going to happen after Halloween. I shut her down thinking we'd be playing World Series games at Camden Yards this week, but alas, we're going to make things happen. So for the month of turkey and mistletoe, and Mariah Carey will be resurrecting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. Have Ravens scratch-offs to give away. We're going to be everywhere. I'm going to have Governor Wes Moore in Annapolis later on in the month. Brandon Scott's allegedly joining me over at Coco's, where they just won a big award with the FM station that I listen to playing the classic rock. Also, our friends at Window Nation, 866-90-NATION. You buy two, you get two free for 5 years, 0% financing. And our newest sponsor for the Crab Cake Tour, Jiffy Lube, Multicare. Big shout out to all them and changing my oil over at Merritt Boulevard in Dundalk. Although there's a Jiffy Lube in your neighborhood as well. I've really been looking forward to this piece. Anybody that follows me on social media knows I went out to the West Coast. I went to see my mother's hometown, cried a lot, ate a lot of Southern food, mac and cheese, got fat and indigestion. Rock with Sammy Hagar and U2 and all that. But before I went away, I set up this appointment. I don't know Tom Kelso well. I think I've met him once or twice here and again because he was the Maryland Stadium Authority chairman for 8 years during the Hogan administration. Of course, I've had Larry Hogan on. I'll have Wes Moore on. I'm not apolitical. Anybody that follows me knows my politics, but I am a concerned citizen. And all the nonsense with Bisciotti throwing me out and Angelos throwing me out and me exploring my legal rights as a journalist to work in my right to work in a state facility led me to the current Maryland Stadium Authority this year. But certainly in the administration change and Hogan goes out, Wes Moore comes in. We have a lease for the football team. We don't have a lease for the baseball team. I've been diving in for 9 months. John Angelos, who is a confirmed liar, promised to open his books earlier this year to Dan Connolly. I'm still threatened and thrown out. They threatened my employee in Arlington, Texas 3 weeks ago to not have clubhouse access because he had the audacity to show up with me. So, when it comes to this, I just want a good deal for our citizens. I want the baseball team and football team to be in good hands. I want them to win, and they both have won this year, this is a good time to be talking about giving $1.2 billion of all of our money to the city. And we're going to have David Bramble on soon talking about Harbor Place. But Tom Kelso has agreed to come on. I wish it were over a crab cake, but it is over some delicious Royal Farms coffee in my cold roofing mug. Tom, first things first, thank you. I've seen you speak out in the Banner and in the Baltimore Sun. And the first question I had is, who is Tom Kelso? I know I've shaken your hand at a Mako event or here and again. And I know you've been a concerned citizen. And the people that I know who know you said to me, put Tom on. He's going to be honest with you. He's going to shoot straight. He's an honest guy. And I'm like, good, because I haven't had a lot of that around sports in around 32 years of doing this. So welcome. And thanks for making time for me today.
Well, Nestor, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to, try to shed some light on what is actually contained within this memorandum of understanding that was signed back on September the 27th.
That's not a lease, right?
It's definitely not a lease. A memorandum of understanding or a letter of intent, are basically just that. They express intent, but they're not legally binding. They're just essentially a handshake. And then from there, you still have to work through all of the details in a legal agreement that ultimately becomes the lease. And when we work with the Ravens to have built negotiate their new agreement, we didn't bother with any type of memorandum of understanding or letter of intent. We just went right to the negotiation of the lease. And so, for example, we started sometime around early September of 2022, and it was approved by the Board of Public Works on January the 4th of 2023. So just about 4 months it took us to actually negotiate the lease and to get all the approvals necessary from the NFL Finance Committee, NFL owners, the Maryland Stadium Authority Board, and then the Board of Public Works. So you can do a lot if you really focus on getting it done.
Well, from my perspective, I see your name and I see you being, honest. Somebody say uppity, or why is he getting involved, or he's the old guy, or this is Hogan versus Moore, or this is Republicans versus Democrats, or whatever this would be. Or you might have some issue with Angelos that you didn't have with Dick Cass and with Steve Bisciotti. But first things first, the first question I had is, who's Tom Kelso? And I know enough. We were already linked in, so I mean, I go and I check and I see, ran Hogan's committee 9.5 years ago now. But prior to that, you ran John Carroll School. You're a Harford County resident. You ran a petroleum company, right, or a petroleum distributor many years ago. But like, how did you get into this stadium authority thing? Are you like an Orioles season ticket holder who had an ornithologically correct hat and was at the Cal Ripken game? I mean, because you're like a local guy, and I don't know you well, but the first thing I see when I see somebody really speaking out and being courageous about $1 billion of our money and the future of our city, as a Baltimore positive guy, first thing is, why are you involved in all this? How did you get involved? What's a nice guy like you doing in a place like this?
Nestor, I think that's a great question. It's probably more by accident than anything else. But Larry Hogan and I became friends back in 2011. And at that time, he was not thinking of running for office. We were just friends. And as he started,
I remember when Al Redmer told me, Al was a sponsor and a friend. Al's like, Larry Hogan's going to be the next governor. I'm like, I don't know him. I didn't know that we all knew him the day he was elected. So congratulations to you for. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, to get a Republican elected in primarily blue. I mean, for what you guys did, is an amazing kind of run the last 8 years. It really was.
Well, it's really what he did. And I'm not terribly political. So when he asked me to chair his reelection campaign, I just basically told him, Governor, I'm not the right person. And he said, well, I think you are. And he said, you'll figure it out. And I did. I'm more of a doer, a problem solver, an organization builder, the kind of person that, takes a task and figures out, how to get it done. And I always feel like the more difficult that task is, the more challenged I am and the more effort I put into it. And I'm always happy when something turns out successful. So when he became governor in 2015, he asked me if I wanted to be involved in any of the appointed positions. And I told him that I was really intrigued by the Maryland Stadium Authority, not because of the sports aspects or the stadiums, but because the Stadium Authority had just been tasked with building 30 new schools for Baltimore City. And I am.
People don't even know this, right? Like, I'm not sure I know this, Tom. Really?
Most people don't know what a phenomenal organization the Maryland Stadium Authority is. It's kind of hard to get your arms around, but part of the Maryland Stadium Authority is focused on the purpose for which it was originally formed, which is to own and to operate and maintain the Camden Yards sports complex. But the other part of the Maryland Stadium Authority provides off-site construction management expertise to cities, towns, counties all across the state of Maryland. So
was it envisioned that way when Herb Belgrad was involved and John Moe, before the Ravens were even here, really before the complex was funded and built in 88, 89, 90, when they were basically building the baseball stadium as we'd know it now?
Yes. Well, the first off-site project that the Stadium Authority ever did was the Hippodrome Theater. And that is when John Brown was chairman of the authority. And
that was after Moog and turn of the
governor.
century. Turn of the century? Yeah.
Yes, turn of the century,
okay.
Correct. And then it just kind of built from there, spiraled from there, building the, second portion of the Baltimore City Convention Center, and then building some of the minor leagues baseball stadiums, projects all across the state, the Ocean City Convention Center, Montgomery County Convention Center. We're out in Western Maryland, where I say it's hard to, once you're part of the Maryland Stadium Authority, it's hard to be an outsider again. But this authority is on the Eastern Shore. It's in Western Maryland. It's in Prince George's County with construction projects, and of course, Baltimore City. and it also issues all of the state schools bonds, and then allocates that money out to all of the individual counties, and is available if those counties want to hire the MSA to construct schools in their counties. The MSA is able to do that as well. So it has a broad reach and an enormous impact on citizens all across Maryland. The beautiful thing is that very few people know this. And as I always said to the incredible team at the MSA, is that you're really known by the work you do, not by the name that you go by. And, people are very proud of that. That they just do phenomenal work for the taxpayers of Maryland, the citizens of Maryland, and they take great pride in the fact that nobody really knows that it's the Stadium Authority that's doing all this work.
So basically, you asked for the gig. You wanted the gig. He needed to sign somebody from his team. He signed you. For 8 years, you did this. In 15, it's more about building schools and being a do-gooder and, saying, hey, we did the Hippodrome. We can do this. And we're convention center. But the stadium thing was there all along, right? So back when Dick Cass used to talk to me 10 times a year, I saw for 15 years, Dick Cass and I sat in his office and we would talk about all these things. And I remember him 10 years ago saying, the lease is up in 2027 or, whatever the year was, or 23 or what. No, it wasn't 23. It was a 30-year lease, right? They had 30,
it was up
right?
But it was up in 2027. So
27,
that 30 years.
So, but
the Oriole lease was up in 2021.
They were 6 years apart because of 92 and 98. There was a parity clause in there all along. I don't know that when the thing was built in 92 that we knew we were getting a football team, but knew we would have to have terminology, space, the parking lot where I met Art Modell and the governor at that time, Glendenning in the parking lot that became the stadium. Like all of that was under this umbrella of John Moog at Stadium Authority, then John Brown. I'll be honest with you, Tom. I mean, I've done sports radio every day of my life for the last 32 years in this city and walked the streets. I don't know that I ever thought much about the Maryland Stadium Authority at any point, or that you were seeking publicity in some way. Terry Hasseltine seeking publicity for what he does, but this work that I never. You folks never came to me and said, hey, we're doing this school. Let's talk about it. Come on. So, and I maybe wasn't doing that kind of work back then, but I don't know that any of it came to me obviously the Orioles situation is its own animal, but Dick Cass would bring it up with me that because Steve put money into Escalade, all the things that David would sit in my office and say, that's going to be Steve's problem. That's going to be because we got the stadium built. You want better TVs. You want better sound. You want, different club. That's all going to be. And Steve invested in all of that. And Steve took credit for saying, I'm putting my money in and through the course of time for all the improvements. And I remember with Dick is like, they have a bigger scoreboard in Dallas. We have to have a bigger score. I got all of that from the Ravens perspective and how they could fund it through my money and my PSLs and all of that. But it's been very quiet on the baseball side, right? I mean, other than the left field wall moving a couple of years ago, and that happened during your term, nobody at BAL is going to, nobody asks what's going on. Like what is the lease situation? And I've seen Peter go into failing health. I've seen John sort of take over. I've seen John and Lou, all the legal papers. Every citizen should have seen this stuff, right? And now there's this $600 million that's being offered them that I'm assuming you offered last year when you were sitting in the seat. Give me the lowdown on the last 24 months of your exit and your attempt to hand this to Wes and say, stadiums are done. We took care of all of this. We got all of this money. It took 4 months to get. Here it is. Here's the future. Here's the plot.
All right. You said a ton. So let me unpack some of it.
Let's go.
So back in 2015, I knew that if Larry Hogan was re-elected in 2018, and that if I didn't screw something up and I was still chairman of the authority after 2018, is that we were going to have to confront an Oriole lease. So Mike Friends, who is still the executive director of the Stadium Authority, and I started meeting with Peter Angelos back in 2015, and I would try to begin to break the ice on a discussion about a new lease. And at the end of every meeting, he would say to me, well, why would I want to do that? And I would think to myself, well, I just explained it to you, but we would have great conversations, and I would leave, we would leave. And about every 120 days, we'd go back and we'd just keep bringing it up. At the same time, we made the decision to begin to try to build a relationship with John and Lewis, on the belief that we didn't know ultimately what would happen if Peter, wanted to sell the team, or if Peter were to become incapacitated in some way, as to who would be running the team. And so over the course of from 2015 until I left in March of 2023, I had almost 200 meetings or telephone calls with members of the Angelos family. And while Mike participated in some of them, the vast majority of those were me and John. And, John and I have a good relationship up until, I still think of John as a friend. Our families know our wives know one another. We've done things together. We just agree to disagree on the extent to which the state is being asked to support funding for an additional lease, or a new lease. But we also knew is that we needed funding. So we conceived at the Stadium Authority what I refer to as House Bill 896 of 2022, which is the $1.2 billion package of money that's available, $600 million for each team. And
that's not an arbitrary number, right? Why was that number picked?
Well, it's an interesting question. The Orioles had actually hired a firm by the name of Gensler to look at some options within the stadium and things that we might be able to improve or change that improve fan amenities, but also were some infrastructure things, some systems things that needed to be done as you extend the useful life of the stadium. And when we costed it out, it was about $600 million. And so when we went and pitched Governor Hogan, he said, well, how much are you talking about here? He said, I love the idea of the bill, but what are you talking about? And we said $600 million for each team. And that's where the $1.2 billion came from initially.
Which is twice as much as either stadium ever costs.
Oh, it's way more than any stadium cost. And it's also, by the way, Nestor, and I think this is important for people to understand, is that if you look at what other teams are getting today in other cities, is that $600 million for an existing stadium is far and away greater than what other teams in other cities are getting. So, for example, Oakland is trying to move their baseball team, or the Oakland A's are trying to move to Las Vegas. Clark County came up with $385 million for a new stadium. That means is that the A's have to pay anything over and above that. In Milwaukee, where they've got a stadium newer than Camden Yards that's in terrible condition, is that they're getting $500 million, and anything over and above that has to be paid by the team. So when we pitched the
Nashville, by the way, also is a Titans deal, because I want to bring Nashville in because everybody asks about that, and I've talked to a lot of folks. Wow, what went on in Cumberland County and the city of Nashville and the state of Tennessee to fund a football stadium that's going to be where Taylor Swift does residencies, right? And where they're going to have Super Bowls.
But understand is that the stadium that the Titans that the Titans play in today, was built after M&T Bank Stadium, but it was built so poorly and it was maintained so poorly is that the stadium is essentially obsolete. And so it needs to be torn down, and another $1.2 billion or whatever it is needs to be spent. And our goal at the Stadium Authority with this bill was to not just give the teams the flexibility to have the fan things that the fans desire, that brings fans out to stadiums, but was also to extend the useful life of the stadiums out in the future as long as we possibly could. There's no reason Oriole Park doesn't last 100 years if it's maintained properly. There's no reason that M&T Bank Stadium doesn't last 50 or 60 years if it's maintained properly. But if you don't maintain these things properly, is that you end up having to rebuild them or build new, and that's a lot more expensive than the money that the legislature allocated.
Tom, I've done this the last 40 years. Hockey rinks, basketball rinks, stadia. I've been in every single one of them. I take great pride in that. I put a lot of effort into that, a lot of my life into that. And I've seen, I was in Arlington 3 weeks ago. They got a baseball stadium next to the baseball stadium, next to the football stadium. And it used to
the
be a theme
baseball
park.
stadium that's there now, or the baseball stadium that was just replaced, was built after Camden Yards was built. So, this is just reflective of the way that the Maryland Stadium Authority has maintained these stadiums for 30 odd years with the baseball stadium and close to 25 years with the football stadium. They're in tip-top condition because the Maryland Stadium Authority focuses on the infrastructure and the things that extend the useful lives of those stadiums, while the teams are focused on the fan amenity things, right? It's a great partnership that way.
All right. So you were on 200 meetings with the Angelos family this time last year. I don't know if you're hopeful that were you really thinking by Christmas of last year, Wes had been elected, Larry had 6-8 months to kind of exit out, and you had your exit as well, thinking, well, if I would have talked to you a year and a half ago and said in April, are these both going to get done by the time Governor Hogan exits? And you had to have believed that, right? You put this was the most important thing. You did a lot of things, but I'm sure it was the most important thing on your agenda is to walk out and say 2 leases next 30 years, Tom Kelso served the citizens, right?
Well, I mean, that would have been ideal. But, if you look at the Stadium Authority and the history of the authority, is that it's really a continuum from one governor to the next, from the legislature to the next, but also from one chairman to the next. And so all of my 7 predecessors and I are all pretty close. We're different ages, we're different life experiences, but because we've all served in that role, and we've all worked over years to help build the authority's reputation and to continue the great work, is that we look at it as that we're just handing the baton from one group to the next. There shouldn't be a change in focus because administrations change. And my expectation is that while I would love to have gotten an Orioles lease done, is that my hope is that we had set it up in such a way is that the next administration, the next chairman, could just carry forward and finish it off. And I think this is an important thing, at least it is for me, is that if I had questions of my predecessors, I went to them and they helped me. They offered advice, and if I'd have been asked for advice and then I'd have been asked for help, or if I'd been asked for background in any of those 200 conversations, I would have freely have given it to Governor Moore and to my the next chairman.
So no one in Governor Moore's group has asked you what these 200 conversations
never
led to? Never.
I've never spoken to Governor Moore about the background on the Orioles negotiations, discussions, none of it. He's never asked me about it. Craig Thompson and I sat down for maybe 2 hours, and we talked a little bit about it, but we never really got in any details because by that time he didn't have a lot of background. So I offered my help. I continue to offer my help. All I want is a good lease that we can all be proud of and comfortable that the citizens of Maryland are not being taken advantage of. And, that's really important to me. That's always been my goal is to have something that meets the needs, but, isn't so overly generous is that the taxpayers can't get any return on the money that they're investing.
If you just joined us, we are chatting with Tom Kelso. He's the former chairman of the Maryland Stadium Authority under the governorship of Larry Hogan for 8 years, from 2015 through the end of last year. Mr. Kelso has spoken out in the Banner and the Sun and other places, and I wanted to sit. I owe you crab cake at the very least. I got to get up to Pappas or something.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. So let's focus on the Ravens. Okay, because that's the deal you got done. I don't think there's any secrets in this, right? I have not seen it. No one. I don't even know where to find it.
There are no secrets. It's a public document.
Right. Okay, so let's go then. I didn't read it. You know who else hasn't read it? Nobody's read it. So, I've never seen anybody write about it or talk about it or opine about it. What have we as citizens given Steve Bisciotti in this $600 million over the next, is it 15 years, 20? I don't even understand the terms of all of it. So let's start on the Ravens, because the Orioles don't have a lease. And we'll get to all of that in a little bit, but I want to understand what we've given the Ravens.
Sure. Well, that's a phenomenal question. So when we conceived of House Bill 896, this is the funding bill. It actually has some mechanisms in it that make it evergreen. So the way that it works is that each team can have bonds outstanding for work in their stadiums that is up to $600 million at any one point in time. But as those bonds are paid down, is that the stadium authority can issue new bonds to continue to reinvest in the stadiums. The only hook is that every time bonds are issued, is that the lease has to be extended to be at least as long as the longest outstanding bond. And so essentially is that because the teams want to continually upgrade the stadiums so that for fan amenities, is that what happens is that as they continue to do that, we continue to extend the leases. And so the work that's being done at M&T Bank Stadium starting in January of this year, or January of next year, as soon as the season's over, and hopefully the season's not over too soon, is that that money is money that's issued by the stadium authority. The bonds are paid off by money coming from the Maryland Lottery. And so because one of the biggest problems is that you don't want to issue 30-year bonds for investments in stadiums that are going to last 10 or 15 years. Because the problem is that they wear out in 10 or 15 years and you need to spend more, but you're still paying on the outstanding debt. And so
30 years into this, you've learned this.
Exactly.
And through 7 Maryland Stadium Authority chairmen, that you learn that point of sale changes. They rig cable television in there for home team sports, and the internet came. Like I remember sitting at the stadium and I couldn't get online. I couldn't do my job in the upper deck, right?
And the latest improvement to the stadium for a club or a venue or something within inside the stadium, it might have a great arc of 5, 10, 15 years. But 30 years is probably too long. And so when we designed House Bill 896, we wanted to be able to do it in a way we could match the maturities of the bonds to the investments that were actually being made in the stadium, so that we were never paying for things that were no longer useful. And so it automatically extends itself as new bonds are issued. And so it's evergreen in nature. It's a great partnership between the MSA and the Ravens as we continue to work together to keep our stadium in great condition, to make it as fan-friendly as we possibly can, and then to continue to extend leases. So right now, we've extended the lease to 2037, but the expectation is it'll just continue to extend as we issue new debt. So, we think we accomplished a lot of things when we designed that bill.
Well, and I guess in Steve's words, and whether he's here in 2037 or he sells the team 2 weeks from Monday, I don't know. But if he's here or not here, his thought is it's going to make it harder for somebody else to move the team. That he won't own the team in 2037. He's a smart guy. He knows we're all temporary here, but the franchise itself, as long as the owner's tied to the state and the stadium authority and getting this money, it remains very attractive for the Baltimore Ravens to remain in Baltimore.
Nestor, you just said something that is so really important. Is the only thing permanent on the Camden Yards sports complex is the MSA in the state of Maryland. Is that the team owners will come and go. And so
even though it doesn't feel that way, because they've been the same.
And we don't necessarily want them to go.
Right.
But the point is that we know that ownership will change hands at some point in the future. We know that governors have an 8-year, 4 or 8 year term. We know that chairman of the authority will come and go. But that relationship that's locked in the Ravens agreement, okay, it's good. It doesn't matter who the owner is, right? It requires the owner to do certain things, and it requires the stadium authority to do certain things. But the expectation is that it continues to be extended over time. And so that's really an important aspect here. And I was reminded by some members of the Stadium Authority team as we were negotiating with the Ravens, and there were certain things they wanted that I was inclined to agree with them on. And I was, my opinion was changed because it was made clear to me is that as much as we like Steve Bisciotti and the team of people that he has running the stadium and the people we work with day in and day out, we can't rely on the fact that they're going to be there forever. We're going to be there forever, and we have to work with whoever the owner is and whatever group of people that he brings in to run the team.
What do people need to know about the parity clause between these two teams? Because it was very weird and uncomfortable. And look, Peter made life uncomfortable for lots and lots of people, including me and all my listenership. During that period of time, especially when he was feisty and wanting the Redskins and wanting his own team and wanting to keep the Ravens out and wanting to keep Washington out. It was just one giant fist. George Steinbrenner. I mean, I've written a book on it, The Peter Principles. Go read it. But I mean, I lived through all of this. I'm an older guy now, but I lived through all of this. And I remember just the angst. I remember Art Modell and his wife telling me that, about bad experiences and about bad vibes and bad feelings and like all of that, because there was this parity clause. And the minute the purple thing showed up down there, all of a sudden Camden Yards wasn't the prettiest thing or the newest thing anymore. And that parity clause was something I've talked about a lot. It was also something he put in the Masson deal with the Nationals as far as media rights that 17 years later, the Lerner family is still looking for their money. But the parity clause was something that was a safety net, I think, drawn up by John Moog in that era to say nobody's going to get preferential treatment. But the Orioles did have a preferential treatment because they were sort of there first, right?
Well, but it actually goes back further. So if you remember Larry Lucchino,
sure,
who negotiated the original lease for first Edward Bennett Williams and then Eli Jacobs, the first lease is that he insisted on a "don't make me a fool" clause. So what he wanted to be sure is that the Orioles got benefit of anything that the state was willing to do to acquire or bring a football team to Baltimore. So if the football team got a better deal to move here than the Orioles got to locate into Camden Yards, then Larry Lucchino wanted to be sure that the Orioles got benefit of that. And so it wasn't long after that Eli Jacobs went bankrupt and Peter Angelos bought the team. And so he inherited the parity clause. And so when the Browns moved to Baltimore and became the Ravens and M&T Bank Stadium was built, Peter made claims under the parity clause. And so that is, the initial way that the parity clause worked. Of course, the Ravens wanted a parity clause. Both teams have a parity clause. Now, I call the parity clause almost a race to the bottom, because what happens is that if you give one team something different, better than what the other team gets, then the other team automatically gets benefit of that. So what happens is that if there are worse things in one lease than the other team isn't stuck with the worst, it's stuck with what it already has. But if there's something better that the other team gets, the other team gets the benefit of the parity clause. So if you give John Angelos $100 million more than the $600 million or $300 million more, and I hear both things, is that the Ravens will get $100 million more or $300 million.
Oh yeah, I have people saying to me, Bisciotti's got to be the happiest guy in the world. Angelos is doing all the fighting to get him money because anything Westmore gives to the Angelos family, the Bisciotti family, or whoever the next owner is going to want that, correct?
Well, that's exactly right. Although let me say this, is that, I didn't work a lot with Steve, but I worked a lot with Dick Cass and I worked some with Sashi Brown. Phenomenal people. They're very concerned about the public perception of what they get and the way they're portrayed. So,
I don't think it's ever really been reported what they got, like in real terms of sitting down and saying, so please tell me, what did they get?
Well, they get the full benefit of House Bill 896. They get to have the Stadium Authority issue up to $600 million of bonds.
That they
And
can
they
use in
get,
any way they want, correct?
well, not any way they want, but it's in conjunction with the Stadium Authority. So while the Stadium Authority is receptive to, the things that are really important from the fan experience standpoint, that the Ravens are really important to the Ravens, while we're doing that work, we wanted to be sure that the infrastructure to the stadium could also be upgraded simultaneously. That's what extends the useful life, and that's why the stadiums are in such great condition. So it's really a partnership. So the Ravens can't do anything they want with the money because it's in partnership with the Stadium Authority. Now, what the Orioles are in the MOU, the Orioles, the MSA will go away. The MSA
What's
will have no
MOU? So hold
further
on,
role.
MOU. You're giving me a new one. MOU.
The memorandum of
Go
understanding
ahead.
that was
Got it.
signed
Okay.
between Governor Moore and John Angelos. Under that is that the Orioles will get unfettered access to the $600 million and any other money that they get. They'll be able to spend it the way that they want. There won't be any MSA partnership. There won't be
Oversight.
any
Literally no oversight.
no oversight, no procurement. And so anything that the Stadium Authority does is that we have to run procurements in order to, get the highest and best bid or lowest and best bid.
So they're not giving deals to their buddies with the state's money.
They absolutely could, right? And they could, set up their own construction management entity and siphon off some of the money as profit into that. It's just an open book. And then so the Stadium Authority board would have no authority over it. And the Board of Public Works in Annapolis that oversees all state spending, okay, above a certain amount, they would have no further oversight as to how that money was spent.
How's that even possible? Because the minute that happens, doesn't Steve and Sashi Brown come back and say, no, we get that now?
Well, they could do that. And whether they actually do it or they don't is that it creates a liability for the state of Maryland. Because even if the existing owner says, I'm not going to ask because I'd be embarrassed to ask for that, that doesn't prevent the future owner from saying, I want that. So it creates an open-ended liability for the state of Maryland under this parity clause.
So the next guy could ask for it, correct? Or demand it, literally demand it.
The next guy will ask for it. So
no, and demand it, not ask for it. He could demand it, right?
Oh, it demand it. I mean, you don't even have to demand. You ask and you get, right? I mean, it does. There is no defense for the state when somebody requests parity. I mean, it's clear. It's not equal. The court would award it, and it's a done deal.
Tom Kelso is our guest. He is the former head of the Maryland State. I knew I was going to get agitated during this, Tom, and that's probably why I needed a crab cake and a nice iced tea or something up in Hartford County.
I don't want to agitate you.
Well, just as a citizen, as a journalist, you and I have had very different experiences with Sashi Brown specifically, and certainly John Angelos as well. But let's go back to the Ravens lease, because I mean, you wrote this, you got this signed, you agreed to this with Sashi and Dick. I guess Dick was a big part of it before he left a year and a half ago. Steve's still wherever he is. And Chad Steele and Sashi Brown went down to Annapolis, shook hands with you, took a picture, refused to talk to anybody, went away. It was Christmas time. They're playing playoff games. I haven't heard anything about it in 9 months, but the Oriole thing certainly has been kicked up. And the current governor, who's going to be on the program in a couple of weeks in Annapolis, Oriole shirt, flying the flag, in the stadium. John Angelos is there. There's a thing on TV. Tom, I talk to people every day who think the lease is done. And because the Orioles have that magic power of Masson and, whatever they tell Kevin Brown to say, he has to say, obviously. That's one of the reasons I don't get in. But there isn't a lease. This is open-ended. It's kind of combustible, right? With Peter's situation and his health and his wife, and the boys and Major League Baseball. And the team was so good this year. I saw this in San Diego where Tony Gwynn got them to the World Series, and Lucchino got a city built in San Diego, and I go out there and visit. It's nice. Billy Joel plays there too. But for me, with the Ravens deal, that's the real deal. That's signed. They've always been the big brother in the deal over the last 20 years as far as being grown-ups and winning. And being more community spirited about all of this. Obviously, John's been kicking and fighting with almost everybody from the beginning. All you have to do is go to the press conference on Martin Luther King Day. But the Ravens didn't do any of this publicly. It was always very quiet. What did they get? What did they not get? What did they want? Like, the one thing that gets to my desk is when I go see Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks and I buy beer and I park and I do all that, the state doesn't drink in the money. And I've known enough over all these years to know putting on soccer events, putting on lacrosse Final Fours, putting on IRL races, putting on concerts at various points, or not putting on concerts in the case of Jimmy Buffett and Van Halen and Faith Hill 20 years ago and getting sued, all of that. I would just say for me, I don't know anything. It's a mystery to me. And I'm a journalist, and I don't know whether my tax dollar from my $15 beer went to the state or not at Billy Joel. My impression is things have changed a little bit because it's so expensive to put those events on. And for a team to put those on or bring a promoter in, the band makes all the money. I know enough to know that's the dirty secret.
Well, right. Well, I'm glad you said that last part, because I think that's very hard for people to understand. And but the two fastest growing elements of income and expense at stadiums is the cost to maintain and operate it, and the amusement tax that's charged on ticket prices. So let's deal with the cost side first. The fastest growing thing is the cost to maintain and operate a stadium. So at M&T Bank Stadium, it's about $1 million a month. And so the Ravens, under their
is that maintenance, or is that paying the employees to cut the grass, to keep the place clean, to keep the toilets flushing, all of that?
Operations and maintenance expenses.
That's toilet paper too. That's hard costs. That's everything.
I'm not sure about the toilet.
Okay, no, I'm just saying, yes, I don't know who buys what and I've been the best customer they've ever had. I've been to every game, but like, I don't know, something's on the wall. Do the Ravens pay for that or stadium? Who's paying for? I literally don't know.
So anyhow, so the $1 million a month, and next year that'll be $1.1 million a month, and at 1.2 or 3. And so the Ravens are responsible for paying for all of it. And so what happens is that for the parts that are construction and maintenance oriented, the stadium authority lets all the contracts. They're run through the procurement process, minority business enterprise, prevailing wage, all of the structures that go with procurement. The MSA board approves them. The Ravens approve them. Any of them that are large enough have to go to the Board of Public Works for approval. And once the work is done, the Ravens reimburse the stadium authority. So the Ravens pay all those costs. Okay, so they don't pay a rent, but they pay all the costs.
Let me just ask this: when improvements happen with the scoreboards got bigger and like, I mean, I've been a Ravens fan forever. I've seen it get better, but when that happens, I was under the impression that the Ravens paid for that.
Well, they did. So
because Steve's rich, and because the Orioles would demand that if they asked for it, they couldn't ask for it, like literally, because it would force you in 2012, let's say, not you, but your predecessor, into a bad spot, right? So the Ravens did put hundreds of millions of dollars into that stadium, right?
They did. So from the time it was constructed, they've put about $250 million into it. Most recently, they put $120 million into it from 2017 to 2019. And so the escalators, the video boards, the boards that are up in the notches, the suites that are in the notches, and a lot of other things that people don't see were actually paid for by the Ravens.
And they're not being reimbursed for that in this, right? This is
they're not being reimbursed at all. That's money that they have spent.
Sunk cost for them. Okay.
Right. And so at the time, they wanted
into a building they don't own, by the way, right? Into it, they put money.
It's a state-owned stadium. They don't own it.
Right. So that's so fair enough. And that's 2 cheers, 3 cheers for Steve Bisciotti on that, because the very few people that rent a place that want to improve the structure of the place, right?
Well, they expect the taxpayers to do it, typically. Right. And so, yes, I mean, look, working with Steve and Dick Cass was a phenomenal experience. I didn't always agree with Dick, But I always knew where he was coming from.
Right,
So
right on,
if you
right
know
on.
Dick, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's when I ask you what they asked for and what they got. And it would seem to me that most of their ask would be reasonable, right? I mean, to some degree, over the course of time, that's been the story with them. But what was important to the Ravens and what was important to the citizens?
Well, what's really important to the Ravens is to be able to keep people coming to the stadium and, keep people coming and, not to let their business model out, but, because payroll salaries continue to rise in the NFL is that ticket prices need to continue to go up as well. And so they still want to keep a packed house and they want to be able to have pricing power when they need it. And in order to do that, you have to have all of the fan amenities that people want, the fan experience things that keep people coming back. People want to see new things. They want to experience new things in stadiums. That's part of the game day experience.
Tom, I went to the Sphere to see U2 last week. Can you do that for me?
How awesome is that?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, man, I just got back from that and I'm like, all right, that's the next thing. I
That's
mean,
the
I went
next
to
thing.
Jerry's
Right.
World and I was at Camden Yards the day it opened. There was never going to be anything, right?
Right.
So
And
we're all
one of the
chasing.
biggest changes in football has been fantasy sports, fantasy leagues, et cetera. So having all of the statistics visibly and available for people in the stadium is really critical so that people are focusing on the game and can still get the information that they're looking for without having to be on their phone the entire time. And so that's huge for either team, for the Ravens, for the Orioles, for everybody. And but what they also want is they want the stadium in great condition. And the way the stadium stays in great condition is that you continue to fix the infrastructure and upgrade the infrastructure and the systems so that the air conditioning works, so that the bathrooms work, so that the steel's not rusting and things aren't,
Well,
in
we're
a
cooking
state
people's
like,
food in there too, right? I mean, like
pardon?
we're cooking people's food in there too. So like
Absolutely. You
there's
got to have
kitchens
great.
everywhere, right? Yeah.
And so one of the things that they're in the process of doing now with the part of the $600 million is that they're upgrading all of the kitchens so that the food quality can be much better and that again the fan experience is what drives the Ravens and it's what drives the Orioles, right? I mean, they're not dissimilar that way. Both teams want the same things. And that's why the authority, I think, was such a great partner is that we got that. But we also want to be sure is that our stadiums are still there and usable 15, 20 years from now. And so that's that protects the citizens, right? So we don't have to rebuild these things. It's the Ravens and the Orioles' job to upgrade the fan experience and to focus on that.
All right, so the Ravens get their deal and the Orioles don't. You had 200 conversations with John Angelos. You had very few conversations with Craig Thompson or with Governor Wes Moore. Where was it left with the Orioles? And the one thing people come to me all the time, and I've had a lot of conversations, with other citizens, informed citizens, hopefully. What do they want? And John parading around Atlanta in a suburb that looks like they took the Owings Mills where there used to be a mall and built a city, literally. That's a lot different than taking a footprint that's over top of a tunnel that our former governor, O'Malley, once came on and said he didn't know there was a tunnel until it was on fire. And he was at the Crisfield clam bake that day. So one of the great stories in his book from his governorship, he's like, I didn't know there was a tunnel and I was the mayor. And I didn't know there was a tunnel under. I hope that John Angelos knows there's a tunnel under there and he can't build a skyscraper. We've seen David Bramble earlier in this week, unleash what the harbor is going to look like. I was down at the convention center several times. They built a little nest down there for pre-playoff games and some of Mayor Scott's folks down there. This was my view. This was my home for 19 years. This literally was my bedroom window. I took this picture out of my office window. So I lived on the 23rd floor Harbor Court from 2003 till 2022. It was my neighborhood. And
it's a great picture. I
thank
love
you.
that picture.
Well, we take a lot of, I can change it, make it purple. I can make it Christmassy. I can make it during the plague with the cross. I can do all sorts of things because we took pictures out our windows every day. I love the city. I love downtown. I loved everything about the way Camden Yards came online. I began my career in December of 91. I was there the first day with John Stedman in 92. Feels like 5 minutes ago. Hard to believe it's been 32 years. But I knew this time was going to come when there's going to be the next thing. And I've already referenced San Diego. I've been to every baseball stadium
Sure.
that there is. I did a tour in 2015, 30 ballparks in 30 days. I've been in every Wrigley. I've seen Wrigley before it had lights. I've seen it now that they've turned it into a casino. So all of these places, what does John think this is going to be if you gave him $1 billion? If you, I don't even know what could
Well,
it be? Because it's
well,
not going to
well, well,
be
let me
what
give
San
you
Diego
some
or Atlanta
history
is.
here. So let me give you some history. So when, I realized that this was likely going to happen, or 2021 was going to happen on my watch, is that we at the authority started working on, how were we going to justify doing something that would be competitive with what other cities were doing. And so we started looking at development options and other options to increase foot traffic and to make this a more productive building, more than 100 days a year or 81 days a year, but a lot more days than that. We started doing that. And the person who came up with and started talking about live, work, play was me. So I started talking in around the 25th anniversary of the stadium in 2017. I started to talk about having to reimagine what we were doing here, and live, work, play, because I knew we were going to have to invest substantial money, and we were going to have to justify to the governor and to the legislature as to how were we going to get a return on that, right? How would it make sense for the state to put money in, and how were we going to get that return? And so that's where this conversation came from. And at the time, John was not running the Orioles; his father was. And so when John took over as CEO, I began to have these exact same conversations with John. And so part of this is a collaborative discussion between John Angelos and myself over years as to, how might we make this so that we could activate this part of Baltimore City on more days than just the 81 days, okay? So the idea is not new. What is in the memorandum of understanding, though, is a concept that is completely opposite of what I was talking about. Because what I was talking about was the state as a partner in some of these things so that the state could derive revenue from whatever additional value we create. But the way
And
that
have
this,
oversight on your own property, right? Like literally, right?
and oversight on our own property. I
Right.
never expected that they would want to demolish the stadium authority itself. And so what the memorandum of understanding basically does is it gives all of this developable property at the warehouse, Camden Station, the parking lots that are just east of the warehouse, essentially to the Orioles. They tout a $94 million of rent they'll receive, but that's over 99 years. So you're going to give it to the Orioles for 99 years, or you're going to give it to somebody for 99 years. You're going to get $94 million in rent over that period of time. But the value of that $94 million in today's dollars is about $15 million. So for $15 million of present value, you're just going to give it to them and let them do with it what they want. And all of the upside, all of it, if there is any upside, will accrue to them, rather than the state being a partner in it
Tom,
and
this is
getting
where
a
I get
piece of the upside.
agitated. This is where I get agitated because I'm old enough to be a
We
young
both
guy
do.
walking through the warehouse district when they had talked about Boog's Pit Beef being a 365 operation, when they talked about the Camden Station upscale Roost Chrissy, we're going to have white tablecloths, the Camden Club, and we were all going to have dinner there on Friday nights. It was going to be a jazz band, and the warehouse itself was going to be this hub of activity. And I got sold all of that when there were 48,000 people down there freezing their ass off in December, buying $3.6 million worth of tickets at a thing called Moonlight Madness that was
Yep.
dreamed up by the Lucchino people when Janet Marie was here and Charlie Steinberg, all of that. And the Angelos family inherited all that when they bought the team in 1993, including a strike in 94 that, it's 30 years ago. You can go read a book on that or a couple books, but that whole area and everything that Mike Gibbons did and everything that Steve Jeppy did to turn this building over here, this one right here, that was
Yep.
former sports legends,
I know the building.
all of that for our audience, I've seen all of this try to push life into the city. And I've also seen the little sports bar they have up between the stadiums in Philadelphia, the Xfinity, and there's bars and okay, you could put that where the Ravens Walk is, and maybe some people will go there. We have a casino, Top Golf is selling. I mean, I sit here and talk about crime and issues and living in the city and me being a me losing $250,000 on a condo that I invested in 20 years ago because I couldn't give it away. And now we're going to build 900 more. I just hear about all of these pipe dreams. And I think to myself, why would the state of Maryland give this to the Angelos family? And
Right.
what's the real plan? If John wants a bunch of money and is the smartest guy in the room and has real plans and real money invested into what the structures are going to look like, all the things that David Bramble's taken 18 months to try to put together. Where are they? You're not in the chair anymore. You're watching as a citizen like the rest of us. What's it going to be, Tom, when it's done?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I was really impressed by the amount of thought and work that went into what David Bramble rolled out yesterday. And whether you agree with him or not, is that you at least have a very good conceptual visual of what he's thinking about. And
And they did their homework, and they've really done a lot
they
of
did
work.
their well. He is actually a developer. John Angelos and the Orioles are not developers. The only developer on the Camden Yards complex is the Stadium Authority. It developed the entire complex. So John Angelos is not a developer. I have no idea what he thinks his plans are. I know what we thought our plans were. And but I don't have any ideas as to what his plans are. But I will say is that one of the reasons is that we were stymied over the last 5 years there. And there are things that we actually could have done. And I look back and think, well, hell, we should have just did them. But the problem is that Peter didn't want us to do anything. And you were always afraid to offend Peter. And so, he would say, well, he was going to want Camden Station for this idea or that idea, the steakhouse, whatever it was. And then he would never follow through. But we were always in limbo and trying to do things with these properties because we were afraid of offending Peter. And then we didn't want to offend John in getting ahead of him when John took over. So it's like, you're waiting for your partner to be your partner, but they never come through and be your partner. And so, I do believe is that there's some great concepts there that we had that if they were put together is that they would improve that facility and improve the usability of the facility on more days than just game days. But it really involves the entire area. It's not just the stadium or the property
There's
adjacent to
no
the
question
stadium.
about it. As a guy who laid in bed every night and looked out this window during a plague and looked at the city, I just keep thinking these are the two richest, most important parts of the city. They're a part that has our heart and our soul. How can they not be a part of the next great thing that the city is?
So
It
what
has
we
to be.
did, so what we did at the authority, and this is earlier this year, is that we put together and we invited people from the corner of or invested at the corner of Pratt and Light Street, all the way down Pratt Street, all the way to the University of Maryland Medical System and the University of Maryland Professional Schools, all the way north into Lexington Market and Hippodrome, and all the way down into the Caves Valley Partners developments and the casino. And it was actually right before, about a month before my term ended, is that we actually got this group together at a planning meeting at the Stadium Authority with the idea of bringing the entire area together and working together to create a broader live, work, play environment. You can't do it all in the Camden Yards complex because you pointed out that Atlanta is much larger acreage than Camden Yards complex is. So you have to do it, and you can't do it all with public money. You need private money. But University of Maryland Medical System wants a live where you work plan. The University of Maryland Professional Schools have students that live and work in that, need to live and work in that area. You have all the stuff that David Bramble is doing. You have all of the entertainment district that Caves Valley has helped create with the casino, et cetera. And you've got Stadium Square right across 395. And so you have this area that's a natural area to develop. But it has to be done in concert with one another, but it can't be just done by the Orioles or by the state. It has to be done collectively.
Well, the Orioles can't
So
just come in and take Steve's
group, by the
parking
way,
either,
still
right?
exists.
I mean, the Orioles can't just come in and say, we're just going to take Steve's parking. I mean, that's
No,
the other
can't
part
do
of this
that.
is my wife looked at the I mean, my wife lived at the Harbor with me for 19 years too. She looked
Yes.
at these pictures. We were talking about it over coffee right before the segment. And she's like, they're going to redo all the streets, right? She's like, they're taking McKeldin Square. Like, what becomes of Light Street? Where are the cars going to go? How are we going to egress and ingress? Like all of those things. What happens to? I get confused. The ramp, the spaghetti square that comes if you put an Xfinity Live in that parking lot or a 20-story structure. The traffic part of this is also, and the transportation part.
The transportation
it's massive,
part,
right?
So let me say this, because I think very highly of him, is that when we put this working group together, David Bramble actually volunteered to lead it going forward. The Stadium Authority started it, and then David volunteered to take it forward. And his number one goal was to create a transportation flow for this entire area so that you could see how people could get from one thing to the next without necessarily having to go out and get in their car, and to begin to work on that, right? And it's going to take a lot of creativity and a lot of focus over a long period of time. But, you know, if you look at this as a broader area, not just the stadiums themselves, is that you begin to create something that really does, you know, activate this part of the west side of downtown Baltimore. And so that was our goal, was to be part of something that was larger. It's state money, $1.2 billion. The way I looked at it, and I still look at it, is that that's just one thing that the state is doing in Baltimore City. And what we ought to do is be working collectively as a larger group to try to tie all this together so that it's done in a way that we get the greatest benefit from it. What I worry about is that what John Angelos is talking about it, he just wants his. And that it's so focused on what he wants to achieve that it's not really focused on how that fits into the broader area.
Tom Kelso is our guest. He's the former Maryland chairman of the Maryland Stadium Authority. Listen, you've been very. I'm going to need a little while to digest all of this, and
Sure.
I would love to offer you a crab cake or two somewhere up in Harford County sometime in the next month or two, because this doesn't feel like there's a finish line, right? Like, it feels like we're going to get together Thanksgiving time, maybe you and I over the holidays, and talk more, take a deeper dive. I'll try to figure out what I didn't learn in this thing, because as you can tell, I'm rambling on this because I haven't talked to anybody.
There's a lot to digest.
Yeah,
So,
it really is. And
I would look forward to that. Although, you know, I think that we should be cautious here in thinking that we have unlimited time, because the way these things work is that we won't know if there is a lease until it is actually noticed up to go on the agenda for the Board of Public Works. So, you know, I think trying to educate the public and trying to educate policymakers is a really important thing. It's really important to me because, you know, we want people that can actually influence the outcome here to have the information to be able to influence the outcome. To me, that's the most important thing. And, you know, I'm not against good things. I just am against the destruction of the Stadium Authority, the giving away of the development property, and going beyond the $600 million in terms of additional state money. Those are the things I'm against. But I'm not against creative ideas. And I'm certainly not personally against Governor Moore or John Angelos. I just think they're wrong, but it's not personal.
What would you say to Craig Thompson if you know, like what would you say to him if you called today and say, I need some help? Other than already saying you offered it and the information and what you learned about what John wanted. You had 200 conversations with the Angelos family. Like, I think you have some semblance, or maybe you don't even really know what they want other than money to do whatever they want to do.
There's nothing that's in the MOU that's a total surprise to me, okay? Because I heard various bits and pieces of this, especially last fall, after it was clear Governor Moore was going to be governor, and I started to hear a lot of this stuff from John. So it's not all new to me.
He thought he could get a bigger, better deal than waiting, right? Everybody told me that last year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by that. But if I was asked by either the governor or by the current chair of the stadium authority, would you come in and sit down and talk to us and help us through some of this and give us some perspective? I'd be there today. I'd be there tomorrow. I'm not looking for public acclaim. I'm just looking for a good lease. That's all I ever set out to get, and that's all I want. And if we get one, I'll be out endorsing it. I won't be a critic. I'll be out, saying to the public, I think this is a great deal. So, but I'd be
Between
more
now and when
than
we get together, I want you to think that's the homework for me. What is a good deal? What would be good for our city? I think that's our next conversation should be that, because like I don't know what the Ravens are going to do with all this money. And you said they already put 250 million into it, and I don't see much as a fan. Bigger scoreboard, fine, it's nice, whatever. But like, you don't see a building or a condo or a casino or a sports bar or any of those things that is structural. And I keep thinking to myself, $1.2 billion ought to at least buy like a new building, something.
Well,
I should be able to look at and see
I
something.
think, and I'm not going to get in front of the Ravens because it's their stuff. But they've got some great plans for stuff that improvements are going to start actually being done as soon as the season's over in January. So I think people will respond well to it. The little bit that I know, because a lot of it was done after I left. But what I've heard from people is that there's some really creative stuff, and I think
But
that
it's within the
the Ravens
structure of the
will roll it
stadium,
out
though,
when they're
Tom, right?
ready.
Like,
Hmm?
you say really creative stuff. And I'm sure the Ravens are working hard. They got a lot of money. They got something, but they can't build anything. The parking lot's still the parking lot, right? Like, whatever
Oh, no,
they're
they're not
doing
going to
will be
build anything new
right. Okay.
outside the stadium, but inside the stadium, I think you'll begin to see, because you can't spend 600 million in one off season.
Right.
I mean, a plan to begin to change things is really a multi-year plan where that money is actually spent gradually over time, because you can't do a lot while you're playing. The season's over. You want to start the very next day, and then you basically have to take a lot of heavy equipment and a lot of that type of stuff out so that you can begin to use the stadium in August of the year when you start doing preseason games. So
Well, the best example would be left field in Camden Yards and the deck, right? Those were massive changes, structural changes to the stadium. It took time. It's not an easy thing to do.
they take time, and it's and bigger scale than those things, but larger scale. So I'm not going to get in front of the Ravens. They're phenomenal. I'm going to let them roll out their stuff when they're ready.
Well, then no worries. No, I know $600 million should buy some improvements. So, and it's our money, and I'm glad that that you were on the watch for 8 years, and you've been a wealth of information and very, very generous with your time on behalf of me and our audience. I am appreciative, and I'm appreciative of anybody that is. I don't think it's even in your in the way you are to be so outspoken that you're looking for any light or heat to this. I mean, if you were, you could have been on my show for 8 years running the thing. Like the
I
fact that
spent 8 years trying not to talk to the media.
I understand that, and that's all the more important why you're. I mean, I see this as you really ringing putting on a red light and saying there's a fire here, and we should be talking
Nestor,
about
I am
this.
in a very uncomfortable position because I know I'm the only person that has a grasp of all of the facts and everything that happened up to this point. And I wish that there were other people. I wish that more people had the knowledge to come out and talk about some of this stuff. But I know that I'm the only one, and I do know the difference between right and wrong. And let's make this right. Let's not do it wrong. And but it's very uncomfortable at times to be out here by myself, especially against a popular governor. And the team played great this year. Congratulations to the Orioles, to Mike Elias, to John Angelos. I mean, they played great. It was phenomenal. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And but I hope that people who disagree with me appreciate that. I'm not out looking for acclaim myself. I'm really just trying to get a better, put the state in a better position to get a better deal.
Well, you're going to get a crab cake out of this either way. Tom Kelso is here, former Maryland Stadium Authority chairman under the administration of Governor Hogan, and good Harford County resident. So Glassman sent me a birthday wish. So I have to say hello to the former county executive and get him well soon. Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Crab cake soon. And I learned a lot. And that's it's not even lunchtime. So I appreciate it.
And that's my goal. So I look forward to having a chance to do it again.
Well, good, because some people just think I pop off and I don't know what I'm talking about. What I really try to do is find people like you that let me know that I know what I'm talking about. So you've cleared my head a little bit, but made it spin. Tom Kelso here, big appreciation, and we're going to break that into a couple of segments out on the radio station. If you're out there, we're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery. This is how the stadium stuff gets paid for, from what I understand. Please do this responsibly if you're doing this, and please come on out and participate. We're going to be at State Fair. We're going to be over at Costas. We're going to be down at Fadley's in a couple of weeks. We're going to be with Governor Moore in Annapolis later on this month as well. We'll be giving these Maryland Lottery scratch-offs away. Also, our friends at Window Nation, 866-90Nation. You buy two, you get two free. 0% financing for 5 years. That's a pretty good deal. And then also our friends at Jiffy Lube and Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. On behalf of everybody around here and who loves sports, I know it didn't have to do too much with baseball and football, but certainly a lot to do with our experiences. I'm Nestor. We're WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore positive.